What happens when one of Hollywood's most private stars is pushed one question too far, live, on national television? Before we dive into this explosive moment, make sure you subscribe to View Storm, hit that like button, and drop a comment on what you would have done if you were in that chair. Because what you're about to witness isn't just an interview. It's an eruption. The studio lights of The View gleamed like 1,000 tiny suns. The crowd was buzzing, that restless, expectant hum before something special. The producers knew this episode would trend. Leonardo DiCaprio, the elusive legend, the eco-warrior, the Oscar winner who rarely sits for daytime television, had agreed to appear. Rumor had it he was promoting a new environmental documentary, but the unspoken truth, everyone wanted a glimpse of him, the man behind the mystique. Sunny Hostin sat poised at the table, cards in hand, her tone a perfect blend of journalist and talk show warmth. Please welcome Academy Award winner, Leonardo DiCaprio. The crowd exploded. Cheers thundered as Leo walked out, signature grin in place, hand raised in that practiced, humble wave. But even through the applause, something about him seemed tight. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He took his seat, nodding politely to each co-host, Whoopi, Joy, Sarah, and Sunny. "Thank you for having me," he said, voice calm but clipped. What no one knew was that before the show began, backstage tension had already simmered. Sunny had pushed for a specific line of questioning, about Leo's personal life, his relationships, the viral age gap debates circling social media. Producers had hesitated, but ratings pressure won out. Sunny got the green light. The first few minutes were easy. Talk about climate change, activism, the upcoming documentary. Leo's rhythm was smooth, his media armor intact. But then Sunny leaned forward, smile tightening just enough to suggest something beneath. "So, Leo," she began, her tone almost playful, "you've spent your life protecting the planet, but I think a lot of people are curious. What about protecting your privacy?" He looked up slowly. "My privacy?" "Yes," she said, glancing at her notes as the audience chuckled. "You've been in the spotlight since you were a teenager. You've dated some of the most famous women in the world. And recently, there's been a lot of chatter about, well, your dating preferences. You know what I mean." A ripple of laughter rolled through the studio. Leo didn't laugh. He leaned back, hands clasped together, jaw tight. "I'm not sure that's relevant to why I'm here today," he said, polite, but with an edge. Sunny didn't back down. "But people want to know who Leonardo DiCaprio really is. You've always been mysterious, selective with interviews. Isn't it fair for fans to want transparency from someone they admire?" The air shifted. Joy Behar shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Whoopi cut in lightly. "Careful, Sunny," she joked, but Sunny pressed on. "You've spoken about responsibility," she said. "Do you feel a responsibility to address criticism about your personal choices? Especially when people online say it contradicts the causes you stand for." Leo blinked. For a moment, he seemed unsure whether to laugh or walk out. Instead, he exhaled sharply through his nose, voice dropping low. "Sunny," he said, eyes narrowing, "I came here to talk about climate change, not clickbait." The audience gasped, an audible oath swept across the room. Sunny tried to recover, smiling nervously. "I didn't mean it as clickbait, I meant." Leo cut in, voice sharper now. "No, you meant what you said. You meant to provoke a reaction. And congratulations, you got one." The room froze. Even the camera operators hesitated. The live feed caught every flicker of emotion on his face, frustration, disbelief, the faintest hint of anger long restrained. Whoopi leaned forward, trying to diffuse. "All right, let's just take a breath." But Leo wasn't done. "You know, I've done this for 30 years. Every time I try to talk about something that actually matters, the planet, the fires, the oceans, someone decides it's better television to ask who I'm dating. Do you have any idea how exhausting that gets?" His voice rose, not shouting but heavy with the kind of emotion that makes silence deafening. The crowd didn't know whether to clap or cringe. Sunny's composure faltered. "Leo, He shook his head, exhaling. "You don't get it. You're not interviewing me, you're testing me. Like I owe the world an explanation for every rumor that trends on social media. I'm here to talk about the world literally falling apart, and we're talking about gossip." Whoopi mouthed to a producer off camera. "Cut to break." But Leo kept going. "I've given everything to my craft. I've spoken out about issues most people ignore. And yet, one tabloid headline gets more coverage than an entire rainforest burning." He looked directly at Sunny. And you're feeding that. The words landed like a hammer. Sunny sat still, eyes wide, her lips parting but no words coming. Around her, the set was a sea of stunned faces. Joy lowered her eyes. Saya sipped from her mug to fill the silence. For a long moment, it was just breathing, Leo's heavy, visible effort to rein himself in. Then, almost to himself, he muttered, "This is why I don't do live shows." The audience reacted with scattered murmurs. Finally, Sunny spoke, voice small but steady. "I wasn't trying to disrespect you, Leonardo. I was just doing my job." He met her eyes. "Then maybe your job needs to change." The silence that followed was the kind that ripples outward, the kind that feels like something sacred just broke. Then the camera light flashed red. They were still live. Whoopi jumped in with forced cheer. "All right, we're going to take a quick break. Folks, don't go anywhere." But the damage was done. As the theme music swelled awkwardly, Leo's expression stayed cold, his eyes on the floor, jaw working. Sunny glanced toward the audience, trying to maintain a host's poise, but her hands trembled slightly as she shuffled her cue cards. The feed faded to commercial, but the audience inside the studio sat frozen. Some whispered. Some applauded in strange solidarity. Others looked like they'd just watched a car crash in slow motion. Backstage, producers scrambled, cutting mics, gesturing wildly, trying to figure out whether Leo would return after the break. And in that tense, electrified air, something unspoken had shifted. The movie star who'd spent his life avoiding confrontation had finally snapped. But what pushed him there? That's where the real story begins. The commercial break light blinked red, and instantly the studio dissolved into chaos. Producers swarmed the table, whispering, hands flying. Stage managers signaled from the shadows. Audience members murmured nervously, still buzzing from the confrontation they'd just witnessed. Leo sat motionless. His chair was angled slightly away from the co-hosts, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. It wasn't the stillness of calm. It was the stillness of someone holding back a storm. Sunny Hostin sat 2 seats away, her face pale under the harsh lights. A makeup artist rushed forward with a brush, but she waved them off. Her hands were trembling. Whoopi, ever the veteran, leaned into her mic, which was still off. "We'll live again in 30 seconds, she said evenly. "We all take a breath. We move forward." "Understood." Leo didn't look up. Joy Behar muttered to Sarah Haynes under her breath. "He's not coming back after this." You can see it in his face. Sarah's lips barely moved. "I can't believe he went off like that. That was real." The floor manager held up 10 fingers, 10 seconds. Then 5. Then the red light flashed again. Whoopi's voice, forced bright, cut through the tension. "And we're back on The View. We're having a passionate discussion today with Academy Award winner Leonardo DiCaprio about his environmental documentary Burning Eden." The audience gave an uncertain round of applause, polite, cautious, almost apologetic. Leo straightened, forcing a faint smile that didn't belong to his face. "Thank you," he said flatly. Sunny's voice was softer now, careful. "Leo, before the break, I think there may have been some misunderstanding. I want to make sure we focus on your message." He nodded curtly. "That would be great." The tension was electric. Every word hung heavy. Sunny shuffled her cards, searching for a safe question. "In Burning Eden, you highlight communities directly affected by rising sea levels. What message do you hope audiences take from that?" Leo paused, long enough for everyone to feel it. "I hope," he said finally, "people understand that the real crisis isn't what celebrities trending this week. It's what's happening to the planet while we're too distracted to care." His eyes flicked briefly towards Sunny as he said it. She caught the glance and felt it like a spark. Whoopi, sensing the thin ice beneath them, jumped in. "That's right. It's about perspective. And Leo, you've been doing this activism for decades now. What keeps you motivated?" He softened slightly, the question familiar ground. "I guess. I just can't turn away anymore. Once you've seen it, whole communities displaced, children living in toxic air, it changes you. You can't pretend you don't know." The sincerity in his tone cracked the shell of tension for a moment. The audience listened. Cameras zoomed in close, the glint of sweat on his temple, the slight tremor in his hand. Sunny took a breath. She wanted to repair the damage, but every word she rehearsed in her mind felt wrong. Still, the producer in her urged her forward. "Ask something human. Redeem it." "So," she said softly, "when you talk about empathy and awareness, do you think Hollywood does enough? You've been at the top for so long. Do your peers listen to you? Leo tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly. Some do. Some don't. Hollywood's a place of noise, a lot of people talking, not many listening. Joy jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. That's true of this table too, she quipped. The audience laughed, grateful for relief. But Sunny wasn't done. She wanted the humanity back, not the hostility. She leaned forward, voice careful but earnest. Leo, I think people see you as this mystery. The private icon. I think what they really want is connection. Not gossip, not scandal, but you. The person. The audience hummed softly in approval. Leo looked at her, really looked. His jaw unclenched. For a second, he seemed caught between anger and something else. Vulnerability, maybe. I appreciate that, he said, quieter now. But sometimes, privacy isn't about hiding. It's about surviving. You give too much of yourself to the world, you forget what's left to keep. The room went still. Even the crew paused. Sunny nodded slowly. That's fair. I think we forget that, watching from the outside. Leo's voice softened. You all do your jobs, I respect that. But when you've been dissected since you were 19, you learn to protect the pieces of yourself that still belong to you. Otherwise, you become a character instead of a person. Applause broke out, cautious at first, then swelling into something real. The tension cracked open, letting light in. Sunny smiled, eyes glassy now. That's a powerful answer, Leo. Thank you for saying that. He exhaled, shoulders lowering for the first time. Thank you for asking it, respectfully. The audience laughed, relief, recognition, warmth returning. Whoopi chuckled. Okay, we've officially had the most emotional view segment of the week, y'all. But as the cameras widened for the outro, the control room whispered in frantic tones. The clip from before, the moment Leo snapped, had already leaked online. Someone from the live audience had filmed it. A shaky 30-second clip was already spreading like wildfire on X, TikTok, Instagram. Backstage, phones buzzed. Producers exchanged panicked looks. The #DiCaprio meltdown hashtag was climbing fast. Leo didn't know it yet. Neither did Sunny. They were still live, still trying to end gracefully. Whoopi turned to him. Leo, before we go, one quick thing. What's one thing you'd say to young people watching who feel hopeless about climate change? Leo thought for a moment. Don't wait for heroes. Be the person who acts. Because waiting, that's how we lose. The audience applauded again, a full, genuine roar this time. Beautifully said, Whoopi smiled. We'll be right back after this. The light flicked off. Mic's cut. Sunny leaned toward Leo, voice low but sincere. I'm sorry about earlier. I shouldn't have phrased it that way. Leo shook his head. You were doing your job. I just don't always handle the noise well. A beat passed. Then, the faintest smile. Maybe that's on me. Sunny smiled back. Maybe it's on both of us. It was human, fragile, real, two professionals trying to mend the fracture. But outside the studio, something much larger had already begun. Within minutes, millions of people would see a distorted version of what happened. 30 seconds of fury without the context, without the apology, without the nuance. And by the time Leo stepped off that stage, the story had already escaped him. The headlines were writing themselves. The segment had barely ended when the first notifications began to buzz through the air like hornets. Producers' phones lit up one after another, their faces turning from confusion to panic. By the time Leo reached the backstage hallway, the clip, that 30-second flash of fury, was already everywhere. The video was grainy, filmed from the audience's front row. It started right as Leo's voice hardened, catching the moment he said, "You meant to provoke a reaction, and congratulations, you got one." It cut right after that. No context, no apology, no quiet reconciliation. Just raw, unfiltered tension. The caption read, Leonardo DiCaprio snaps at Sunny Hostin live on The View flushed face #DiCaprio meltdown #The View. And the internet, predictably, exploded. By the time Leo's car door shut outside the studio, his phone had already received 3 missed calls. His agent, his publicist, and his longtime manager. He ignored them all. The city noise outside the blacked-out SUV blurred into a distant hum. He sat staring out the window, the flashing cameras still echoing in his mind like aftershocks. His assistant, a young man named Josh, finally broke the silence. "It's bad, Leo. TMZ, Variety, even BBC, they are all running it. They are calling it DiCaprio's daytime blow-up. Leo's jaw flexed. Of course they are. Josh hesitated. Do you want me to post a statement? Something about being taken out of context. Leo closed his eyes, leaning his head against the cool window. No, not yet. Inside the View's studio, the atmosphere wasn't any calmer. Sunny Hostin sat alone in her dressing room, still in her bright yellow outfit from the segment, but her reflection in the mirror looked colorless. Her phone was vibrating constantly, texts from colleagues, producers, even strangers. One headline blinked across her screen. Sunny Hostin embarrasses DiCaprio with personal question. Fans call it a trap. Another one. Sunny Hostin crosses the line. Did she push DiCaprio too far? And then the opposite side. Leonardo DiCaprio's male ego strikes again. How Hollywood men react when women challenge them. Sunny tossed her phone onto the counter and buried her face in her hands. She hadn't meant for it to go this way. She'd been doing her job, pushing for honesty, for humanity, but what the world saw now wasn't journalism. It was a public takedown. There was a knock on the door. Whoopi stepped in, calm but firm. You okay? Sunny forced a laugh that cracked midway. Define okay. Whoopi crossed her arms. It'll pass. Everything does. But right now, you've got to get ahead of it. Say something real, not PR polished. Real. Sunny nodded. He's the one people love. I'm the one they'll blame. Not if you handle it right, Whoopi said. You weren't wrong to ask questions. You were wrong to underestimate how far he's willing to go when pushed. Meanwhile, in a hotel suite across the city, Leo's team gathered in crisis mode. His publicist, Marla Trent, had seen this movie before, except this time, it wasn't a tabloid rumor. It was a video. Uncut. Viral. Damage control, she said, pacing. We release a statement tonight. Something measured. Mr. DiCaprio regrets how his words were perceived and stands by his commitment to respectful dialogue. Simple. Deflective. Leo stood by the window, looking down at the streets below, crowds, flashing screens, his own face replaying on every device. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth, he said quietly. Marla turned to him, exasperated. Leo, this isn't about truth. It's about perception. You're being painted as volatile, dismissive, especially toward a woman of color on a daytime platform. You can't win this one with silence. He didn't look away from the window. Sometimes silence is the only thing left that isn't fake. Marla sighed, rubbing her temples. You want to be righteous. Fine. But the internet doesn't care about nuance. You give them a spark, they'll build a bonfire. Outside, the world was burning, not the literal forests Leo fought for, but his digital image. Fans were divided into factions, #Team Leo and #Team Sunny. Clips were remixed with dramatic music. TikTok creators acted out the confrontation. Reaction videos flooded YouTube within hours. One tweet went viral. This is why DiCaprio never does interviews. They poke, he explodes, we feast. Another countered. Sunny Hostin did her job. Celebrities can't control every narrative forever. The next morning, news anchors dissected it like a cultural autopsy. CNN called it a moment of unfiltered masculinity. Fox News dubbed it Hollywood hypocrisy. Social media analysts called it a masterclass in viral tension. But beneath the hashtags and hot takes, two real people sat in two separate rooms, both silently watching their reputations unravel. Sunny scrolled through her mentions until she stopped at one comment that pierced through the noise. Funny how the woman asking questions is always the villain when a man loses his temper. She stared at it for a long time. Across town, Leo was watching an edited segment of the interview that a fan had posted. The full, uncut version this time, including his calm answers afterward and his quiet apology backstage. The caption read, "Watch the whole thing before judging. Context matters." It had fewer views than the viral clip, but it struck him deeply. For the first time since the incident, he let out a small, hollow laugh. "Context matters," he murmured. "Imagine that." He reached for his phone and finally called Marla. "Draft the statement," he said. "But make it mine." That evening, a simple message appeared on his Instagram. Today's conversation on The View became emotional, and I take responsibility for that. I let frustration over constant sensationalism distract from the important issues I came to discuss, the environment and the crisis we all face. I respect Sunny Hostin and the work she does, and I regret if my tone made it seem otherwise. The planet deserves our focus more than our drama. No dramatic apology. No PR jargon. Just words. Honest, measured, human. Sunny reposted it within an hour with her own caption. We all have passionate moments. What matters is the conversation that follows. Much respect to Leonardo DiCaprio for having one that matters. And just like that, the storm began to quiet, not disappear, but shift tone. By the next morning, the hashtags had evolved. #respect the view. #respect Leo. #real conversations matter. But behind the newfound calm, the emotional toll lingered. Leo sat alone on his balcony that night, the city glittering below like a galaxy of cameras. He thought about every moment he'd tried to avoid, every question he'd dodged, every time he'd chosen silence. And he realized something. Sometimes silence isn't survival. Sometimes it's surrender. Somewhere across the city, Sunny was still awake too, staring at the script for tomorrow's show, her name trending for all the wrong reasons. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, we start again." Neither of them knew it yet, but the world wasn't done talking. The fallout had only just begun. The next morning, the world woke up to the echoes of an apology, quiet, sincere, and unlike anything the internet expected. Leonardo DiCaprio's post had reached over 10 million likes overnight. News anchors read his words aloud as if they carried the weight of confession. Headlines softened. DiCaprio takes the high road. Sunny Hostin responds with grace. For once, the media seemed to step back from the fire they'd built. But inside ABC's studios, the energy was still fragile. The View's audience that day was restless, half there for answers, half for spectacle. The crew had prepped Sunny with notes, contingency scripts, even crisis talking points. But she sat in her chair silently as the countdown began, eyes fixed on the mug in her hands. 5, 4, 3. Whoopi's voice filled the air again, steady, warm, the calm in every storm. Welcome back to The View. Yesterday's episode sparked quite the conversation across the country. And before we dive into today's topics, we just want to take a moment to address it. The camera panned to Sunny. The studio went still. Sunny looked up, composed, direct, unguarded. Yesterday's discussion with Leonardo DiCaprio was intense, she began. We ask tough questions on this show, and sometimes emotions run high. But I want to say this, I respect Leonardo deeply. He's passionate about what he believes in, and I admire that. It was a real moment. Not scripted, not polished. Just human. The crowd applauded softly. Not a cheer, something gentler. Whoopi nodded beside her. Sometimes the realest conversations are the ones that make us uncomfortable. That's why we're here. What they didn't know, or maybe they did, was that Leo was watching from his hotel room across the city. The muted television cast a glow across his face. He watched Sunny speak, her words calm, professional, but carrying a sincerity that reached through the screen. He smiled faintly. Class act, he murmured to himself. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but he recognized the tone immediately. Sunny Hostin, that was brave yesterday. Thank you for the message. He typed back, you asked the hard questions. Maybe I needed that. A pause. Then another message appeared. If you ever want a round 2, off camera this time, cough is on me. He stared at the screen, chuckled quietly, and replied, deal. As the hours passed, the story began to transform, from outrage to introspection. Opinion pieces shifted from DiCaprio snaps to what happens when celebrities stop performing. Pundits debated whether the viral moment had actually exposed something deeper about celebrity culture, the constant demand for vulnerability, the commodification of personality. Clips of Leo's calmer statements began resurfacing. Fans posted side-by-side videos showing how context changed everything. The full interview on The View became one of the most watched segments in the show's history, not because of scandal, but because of rawness. By evening, social media had found its new language, empathy. One viral post read, "What if this wasn't a meltdown, but a mirror? What if we saw ourselves, the way we demand entertainment from exhaustion?" It hit millions. The comment section turned into a forum, people admitting how quick they'd been to judge. The storm that began with outrage had somehow become a reflection of something larger, a collective reckoning. In a way, both Leo and Sunny had won, not in the headlines, not in the optics, but in authenticity. That weekend, The View uploaded an extended, uncut version of the interview on YouTube titled, "The Conversation Behind the Controversy," Leonardo DiCaprio on climate, media, and privacy. The thumbnail showed Leo mid-sentence, calm, thoughtful, with Sunny leaning in, listening. The description read, "Sometimes the most uncomfortable moments lead to the most important conversations." Within hours, the video was trending globally. Comments flooded in. This felt real. No PR filters, no fake smiles. Leo and Sunny both showed vulnerability. We need more of this on television. This changed how I see both of them. Even late-night talk shows, the same ones that had mocked the outburst days before, now praised it. Jimmy Fallon quipped, "Finally, a celebrity interview where someone actually means what they say." But amid the noise, there was a quieter aftermath. For Leo, it was the first time he'd felt seen, not as the actor, the activist, or the headline, but as a person struggling between purpose and performance. He spent that week out of the spotlight, walking the city streets anonymously in a cap and hoodie, observing people living, moving, breathing. Real. Messy. Honest. For Sunny, the experience shifted her approach as a journalist. She began writing a column called Conversations that cut deep, exploring the human moments behind media conflicts. The first entry was titled, "When the Curtain Drops, What I Learned from Leonardo." In it, she wrote, "Sometimes we mistake vulnerability for weakness. Sometimes we confuse privacy with arrogance. But what I learned that day is this: we're all just trying to protect the parts of ourselves the world can't see." The article went viral. Again. But this time, it didn't divide, it connected. Weeks later, Leo and Sunny would cross paths again at a charity gala in Los Angeles. Cameras flashed as they shook hands, not for the show, but because time had softened the edges. They exchanged a quiet smile that said everything words couldn't. No one heard what Leo whispered to her, but lip readers online would later claim he said, "Thanks for pushing me." She'd replied, "Thanks for showing up." The world moved on, as it always does, but something about that week stayed in the cultural bloodstream. It became shorthand for what happens when authenticity collides with exposure. A reminder that even the biggest stars bleed when poked too hard under the studio lights. And somewhere in that space between controversy and clarity, the truth found its own quiet victory. As the credits roll on this storm of emotion, let me ask you, was Leonardo DiCaprio wrong to snap? Or was it finally a moment of truth in a world addicted to performance? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what side you're on. And if you felt that intensity, that pulse of reality breaking through the noise, then make sure to subscribe to Viewstorm right now. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who loves a good behind-the-scenes truth, and stay tuned, because on this channel, the storm never stops. The lights fade, the echo of applause lingers, and somewhere, between the silence and the storm, the truth keeps whispering.